Hi everybody, welcome back to the Consum coverage of reInvent. Today we're very excited. We have the ultimate ML pundit to joining us today. We have Julien Simon from AWS, who's the global evangelist for machine learning. So welcome, Julien. And how are
Thank
you?
you. Well, I'm good. I'm still standing. It's reInvent is almost over. So a few more days to go, and then I can take a break. But so far, so good.
Excellent. How did you find the keynote? And what's your perception of why ML has grown to such a significant that it deserves such a big billing?
Well, you're right. It's the first year we have a proper machine learning keynote, and I don't know if you caught that, but I think Swami at the end said, "Well, there's even more stuff that we didn't talk about," and yes, in fact, there are a few more things that have been released that were not even mentioned. So the reason why we have so many launches is not just because we think it's cool to build ML technology. It's because our customers are asking us to build that. And I think the tenets that Swami covered are a really interesting way of seeing how customers use ML and what's important to them. And one size does not fit all. So if you're an expert, if you've been doing machine learning and deep learning for years, okay, well, you want the highest performance tools and the easiest tools to scale large training jobs. And there were a lot of announcements on Amazon SageMaker around performance and developer productivity, in the widest sense of the word, profiling, automation, etc. Then again, if you're new to machine learning, if your problem is really, hey, I work in this industry segment, and I know I have data, but I don't have maybe the expertise or the resources to build models, myself. And then, can I use high-level AI services that get the job done? And I think that, that long section in the keynote covering look out for equipment, look out for manufacturing, etc. I think this is exactly that. This is really, AWS customers in the industrial and manufacturing sector coming to us saying, okay, help us solve business problems that we face every day using machine learning, but make it simple, make it easy. We don't want to write TensorFlow code, which is a fun thing to do, but for a lot of customers, this is not an exciting prospect. They don't care for that. They want to go from problem to solution, and these higher level services help them do that. So I'm very, very happy to see that we're trying to help customers across the spectrum, the expert ones and the ones that don't even want to be experts. So this is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty exciting around Lookout, etc. Because that's like you focus on people that doesn't even have data. These big industry machines that are probably people invested over a few years, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, etc. And they're not edge devices, they're not ML enabled or anything. They do the thing they were meant to do,
and exactly, things like and they're not going to change. They are what they are. They, like you said, they're going to stay in the factory or in the warehouse for years. And so ML needs to go to them, and we need to build services that can just bolt on those equipment, pieces of equipment, and just solve the problem. And Amazon Monitron is a good example of that. Put the sensors on the machine, and then that's it. So you don't need to, you can set it up in a day, right, or in hours.
Absolutely. And also there's also a lot of focus around bias in the keynote the other day, and the launch of Clarify and in that area. For that's really interesting. You guys are also open source bits of it, I understand, from what I've seen over the last few days. Can you give us a bit more insight into that?
Sure. So the SageMaker Clarify is our best attempt at helping customers on two big problems. And the first one is bias, and the second one is model explainability. And these are different problems. They are kind of related, but okay, there are still different things. So bias is has been increasingly called out as a problem in AI and machine learning, and I think it needs to be taken seriously. I mean, who here wants to train biased models, unfair models, discriminating models? No one. Okay, no one in their right mind wants to do that. So the question is, well, this is the data that I have. Okay, this is the data that I've collected over the years. It is what it is. And again, no one consciously tries to collect biased data, but the way it's collected, the way it's sampled, processed, etc., could introduce bias. And in large data sets, it is very hard to figure out. So Clarify makes it quite easy, I think, to say, okay, here's my data. These are the sensitive features that I'm interested in. And often these are, demographics, maybe, age range and gender and, where you live and, maybe your salary. I mean, that kind of information. And you want to make sure that your data set is a fair representation of the real world, right? So do you have enough data so that the algo can understand, the subtleties and the statistical patterns that are in there in a fair way, okay? And of course, so you can do that on the data set itself, and then you can do it on the model itself, right? Which lets you see if, maybe the algo that you're using is increasing bias or decreasing bias in a certain way. So one thing I want to make clear is, Clarify will tell you that, for example, let's take a simple example. Let's say you have a credit, credit decision model for a bank, and you want to see if age is a factor, right? So you would say, okay, let's compare the group of customers that are below 45 and the customers who are above 45. Okay. And well, I'm not a credit expert, I'm not a banker, but it seems to me if you have the same risk profile, exactly the same risk profile, it shouldn't matter if you're 25 or 55, right? Or maybe I'm wrong about this, but let's say this is my assumption. I don't want age to be a factor. So I could run this analysis on the data set and see if, all things being equal, people under 45 have the same chance of getting their credit approved that people above 45, right? And then I could do the same on the model and see, okay, is my algo introducing bias or reducing bias, etc. Now, Clarify will pinpoint those metrics and say, well, yeah, there is a difference, right? With respect to this attribute and this threshold, there is a difference. So then it's up to you to say, is this a legitimate difference or not? Because it's a very complicated discussion, because people say, oh, it's biased, it's bad. Well, I don't know. It's maybe there's a good business reason that the outcome is less favorable for a certain group of people versus another one, right? And this is when explainability is important, because explainability will tell you which features have the strongest positive or negative contribution to the outcome. Okay, so if you see that a certain feature has a very strong impact, you could say, well, does that make sense, right? If you see age is actually a very strong contributor to the outcome, you could say, well, wait a minute, it's maybe credit duration is important, credit amount is important, salary range is important, pragmatic data points telling you, yes, you're going to pay your credit back or not. Is age important, or is your location, your zip code important? You could think about it, right? You would have to think about it. So that's what Clarify does. It's going to point you at potential differences in potential different outcomes for groups of people that you define, or group of data instances that you define. It doesn't have to be people. And then you go and figure it out. Okay. You go and figure out, is this justified or not? Okay. And so you can see the metrics and you can see which features are important in the explainability part. And then you can look at this and say, well, is this model doing the right thing? Yes or no? From a business perspective, from a legal perspective, I mean, GDPR, for example, is mandating that you explain your predictions and your algos. And from even an ethical perspective, is it doing the right thing, right? If I have the same risk credit profile as you, but I live in another part of the country, and my credit gets declined and yours gets approved, why is that? Well, Mr. Banker, explain it to me, right? And they need to explain it to me, and they need to explain it to the regulator. So Clarify is a really, really important service. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose an example we had in the UK over the summer was the prediction of, they used an algorithm to predict the grades for GCSE and A-level results in secondary schools, and it was historically biased towards private schools over public schools. So it's that kind of thing.
And hiring, hiring, education, healthcare, banking, financial services, all those areas are our daily lives, right? So we need to make sure those models do the right thing, because otherwise you could be impacting the lives of a lot of people negatively without even knowing it and without even wanting to do it. No one is evil and trying to build evil models. It's not like that. It's just that those things are complex. Data is complex. And you need to make sure this model is doing the right thing. And Clarify is going to help you do that.
Excellent. I want to go back on another subject you touched on, was distributed training, etc. There's a lot around that. I have the book here, the Bible that you wrote. It's really good, folks. I recommend anybody to read it. There is a bit about distributed training, and it's a really good section. When I read it, I did take away from, you have to know the levers to pull. You have to be a bit skillful, and you do have to, it's a bit of gut feel, I think, as well. And I suppose that's where some of the announcements over the last few days come into play.
Well, you could call it experience, or you could call it dark magic, probably a bit of both, and luck. I think is the third ingredient, especially for deep learning. So you make a really good point. So distributed training is, the idea is pretty simple, right? It's divide and conquer. There's too much data for a single instance to deal with. We split it out. We send different bits to different instances. They work on that bit, and then we add up all those results, and voila. So that's the intuition. Now the problem is that as you keep scaling your jobs, as you keep adding instances and GPUs, etc., the amount of chatter, of network communication that takes place between instances and even between GPUs just increases, right, a lot, and that becomes a bottleneck. So what we introduced just a few days ago is a new distributed algo. So it's called SageMaker Data Parallelism, SDP. And the really new thing here is that we still do the same. We still, break the data in chunks and send them to different instances and different GPUs. But there is no central place that needs to collect results and aggregate them. Okay, so there is no parameter server, and the GPUs themselves don't even talk to one another. Instead, they talk to the instance CPUs, right? So the instance that are in the training cluster, we use the CPU to train the model. We use the GPU to train the model, and we use the CPU to receive the parameter updates, aggregate them, and distribute them back. So that frees GPUs from having to communicate and talk to one another. They can just talk to the instance CPU, which is easier and faster. And so, and of course, the second benefit is you don't need to have dedicated parameter servers. You don't need to You don't need to have extra infrastructure just to run the training job. You don't need to penalize one of the nodes saying, hey, on top of training, you're also going to be the parameter server that receives everything. So it's a fully distributed algo. And I mean, you saw the benchmarks that Swami shared. They were pretty good. Benchmarks are benchmarks, but it's still a very significant speed up. So that's data parallelism. That's I would say the improvement on existing distributed technique like parameter servers or Horovat, etc., which were already available. And there's an even weirder problem, which is, what if my model is so large that it won't fit in GPU memory? Okay, and it's hard to believe that this is possible, because the latest GPUs, the GPUs that we have in the P4 family have 40 gigs of memory. So how could a model not fit in 40 gigs? Well, it's the model and the training data. Okay, so think about super large computer vision models that work with 3D images or 3D videos. The samples themselves are huge, high resolution 3D images. This is huge, right? And the models are big. Think about natural language processing, all those really crazy models like BERT and T5 and all those behemoths. There's no other word for it. They're completely crazy and super efficient. Well, it's a problem. So again, we divide and conquer, but this time we split the model itself. Okay, so think of a deep learning network as it's pancakes, right? Or waffles, or it's a stack of waffles. It's anything you want. Pancakes is I think everybody will relate. So you just slice the stack of layers and say, okay, so layers 1 to n go on this instance, and n plus 1 to whatever go on this other one, etc. So each node will be responsible for training on part of the model. Okay, but then of course you need to go end to end, right? You need to go forward and then backward through all the layers. And so you need those nodes to talk to one another and be synchronized, so that when node 1 is done with the initial layers, then data can keep flowing through the next node and the next layers, etc. And so this one is called model parallelism, right? So SageMaker model parallelism, and it's another addition for customers who have to work with those crazy state-of-the-art models. So yeah, and both data parallelism and model parallelism were doable before, but it was mostly manual work, and even for experts it was really, really difficult. So I think we've simplified this once again.
Yeah, great new feature. And then we have Data Wrangler
yes.
and Feature Store, which are very cool features.
Yeah, so these are simpler, but they're probably even more important because it's a pain point that everybody has, right? Every time I talk to data scientists, they tell me they spend from 50 to 80% of their time exploring, cleaning, preparing data. So so in the spirit of the 80-20 law, right? If you've got to optimize something, you want to focus on the task that takes 80%, and this is what Data Wrangler does. So it's fully integrated in SageMaker Studio, and you can connect to data sources in different backends. So pull in your data, visualize it. We have built-in visualization, which is very important in the initial steps of a machine learning project. And you can easily build histograms and scatter plots and whatnot. And you can start transforming data using, we have, I think, over 300 built-in transforms. So very basic ones like, renaming columns and moving columns, and to, the usual ones, one-hot encoding, etc. But there's a long list, and I'm sure it'll keep growing. So you just, click, select the column you want to encode or transform, set some parameters, click, and off it goes, right? And you can preview results, and you can keep adding the transformations intuitively, very easily. You can also add your own code. So if you have existing pandas, PySpark or PySpark SQL code, you can add that to the mix, okay? And so quickly you start building, your pipeline of transformations, and you can visualize results. You can train a quick model in place in Studio to see if the transforms actually help accuracy or whatever type of problem you're working on. So just right there, train a model in seconds on a sample of the data set and see if you're going the right way or not. And then when you're done, you can very easily export the transforms to code, which is another huge pain point. Imagine you've spent a couple of days, messing around with your data. And even if you're super disciplined, right? If you keep track of everything, if you write down every step and that you've done, then at the end of the day, somebody needs to write code for this, to replicate that for training and to replicate that for inference, because obviously that data needs to be processed exactly the same way at inference time. And sometimes you have to do that in different language. There's all sorts of pitfalls waiting for you there. So Data Wrangler solves this by one-click exporting to Python code or feature store code or pipelines code. So it replicates your interactive exploration and interactive transformation to code that you can just go and commit to your repo and use later on. So I think this is a really cool one. And so feature store is the continuation of that. So once you've done your feature engineering with Data Wrangler, or if you have existing features, right, you don't have to use Data Wrangler. You can push your engineered features to an offline store, which is pretty much S3, okay? And you can push them as well to an online store. So it's a very fast key value store where you can put and get features with millisecond latency. And of course, the offline store will probably be used to build data sets. Okay, so you have those S3 objects, you can query them and build your data from them. And the online store will probably be used for inference, where your prediction code can go and pull the appropriate features for customer ID 12345 and save the trouble of having to recode that in your prediction app and with all the potential discrepancies. So I think this is a really interesting one, and of course for collaboration, it's interesting because you have metadata associated to features. Your different teams in the company or your different colleagues can go and say, okay, hey, we already have those features for whatever problem we're working on. So let's reuse that, save time, avoid discrepancies. Really, really cool service. And the final one is pipelines. Sorry.
Go on.
And so once you have all that stuff figured out, it's time to automate and train. And so pipelines will let both data scientists and ML ops teams automate and work together, right? They will happily work hand in hand, hopefully, to build continuous delivery solutions for their models. So we have a Python SDK where you can build series of steps and combine them and run them in Studio and view executions in Studio, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can work locally like that. And then once you have a model that you like, obviously ops need to deploy it in production. And but there needs to be a quality gate, right? It can't just be anyone pushing a model and oops, no, it's not good. Let's roll it back. So that's the ML ops side to pipelines, where using tools like code deploy, code pipeline, CloudFormation, ops teams can, which are the tools that they already use, certainly. They can build reliable pipelines that deploy models in production with, testing and the right level of control. So it's really, we're trying to build this seamless deployment service where, data scientists have a lot of freedom to go and automate what they can automate on their side. just to work faster, and then just ping the ops team and say, hey, here's the model in the model registry, go and please approve and deploy that one, run whatever tests you want to run, etc. And the ops team can take it from there, and there's no, it's again, it's seamless. They can just take that model and go and deploy it using CloudFormation and the robust tools that they like.
Yeah, I was going to say both those things, pipeline and feature store, are exciting for me. I've dealt with both. I've dealt with receiving a bunch of encoders and a bunch of pandas code and having to put that in the Lambda and work out exactly how it works. So yeah, feature store addressing that is going to be brilliant. And then pipelines to date have been you have to have a lot of skilled individuals. You've had to have your ML engineer, your data science, and your DevOps team all involved to a significant level of detail. So it's interesting how pipelines will solve that. We're obviously hopefully coming towards the end of the pandemic in the next 6 months. I hope so too. And obviously there's been an economic downturn in that time period as well, and that's probably created a opportunity for people to do new interesting things, new startups, etc., and set the scene for lots of innovation, I think, in the next year or two. And with AWS lowering that bar to entry in machine learning, what's your view of how big a role machine learning is going to play in that new innovative space?
Well, my goal, my personal goal, is to make ML so boring, so uneventful that anyone can use it. Right? Don't quote me on that. It's a good thing we're not recorded, right? But I'm joking here, but I think ML is still too complicated. It's you still need skills and resources that are not available to a lot of companies. And that are maybe not even available in some parts of the world, right? So that's a shame, and because ML is transformative. It works. We have customers in every industry segment, every size and shape, large enterprise, small startups, SMBs in between, public sector, and so on, universities. So I can't think of a single segment where ML has not proven to be efficient at solving hard problems. So it's, AWS is all about democratizing. If you go back a few years, the AWS promise, so to speak, is, it doesn't matter if you're a very large company with lots of time and resources and money, or if you're just a small startup, or maybe a single person in a garage, you get to use the same services, right? S3 is the same for everybody. EC2 is the same for everybody. DynamoDB is the same for everybody. So if you have a great idea, you can go and build fast, and we're leveling the field, right? So and we saw so many great startups rise and achieve amazing success on AWS because of that. Because they could focus on their business use case, they could focus on the customer experience, and they didn't have to focus on, okay, where does the yellow cable go, right? And I think we're trying to do the same with machine learning, where if you are a bright startup with machine learning PhDs and data scientists, we want to give you the tools that help you grow as fast as possible, focusing on the only thing that matters, and that's the customer. Focusing on building the greatest service or app or whatever it is you're building. Spend 99% of your time on that, not on plumbing, not on tooling, not on infrastructure, not on all those things that need to be there, but just stand in the way of innovation and building something cool. And if you're a bright startup and you don't have machine learning PhDs and data scientists, well, that's totally okay, because there is another collection of services that you can also use to add intelligence or predictive capabilities to whatever you're building. And years ago we launched Poly for text to speech, and Transcribe for speech to text, and now we have Textract, and we have a few more. We keep launching those, and so these are just APIs that you can add to your apps, in hours, minutes, maybe even, and make them smarter and make them more user friendly, more efficient. And this goes for startups, and this goes for manufacturing companies. I mean, you probably saw the Lookout series of launches for manufacturing customers, solving industry and manufacturing business problems using high-level machine learning models and services that you just bring your data to, and you let them do the job. Well, that's I think that's very exciting. I'm really, really happy to see more and more people using ML without having to learn what a convolution layer is, which is fun. I'm an engineer. I'm passionate for that stuff, and I can geek out for days on whatever research paper just came out. But as brilliant as this is, it's not going to help our customers tomorrow. Okay, they need actionable, simple, clear services that they can use today. And some customers are experts, most are not, and we need to help everybody out there.
Great. Well, thank you very much for all of that, Julien. Julien has also done some YouTube videos that you can catch on some of those new services, a bit of a deep dive. So I'd welcome everybody to catch them, and we'll put the links out to that. Thanks. As part of our coverage. Yes, just thank you very much again, Julien. It's been
thank you for your time. It was a pleasure.
Chat. Okay, bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.